Is the Trump administration finally coming to the conclusion that the rest of us have known for months, that a ceasefire with Russia is just not happening? Just how did the U.S. administration misjudge Russian intentions so badly? Plus, are they trying to sell a tough on Russia stance? But is it all just political theater? Plus, we're going to talk about Elon Musk rolling out some truly insane conspiracy theories. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so the Trump administration, at least according to an official speaking to Reuters, said that basically admitted defeat on their ceasefire plan. You might recall Trump's campaign promise was day one. He's going to get a ceasefire in place. We're currently at about day 90 with nothing to show for it. Senior Trump officials, of course, have worked tirelessly to really get this sort of shuttle diplomacy deal between Russia and Ukraine. But ultimately, the U.S. doesn't really have any kind of leverage it can exert over Russia. In fact, they're discovering what anyone who watches this channel or pays attention to the war has known for years, which is that there are two things. First is that Vladimir Putin is committed to conquering Ukraine. Period. He wants to gain the ability to, in some cases, literally conquer and integrate, for example, the 4 contested regions. But more broadly, what Russia wants is to gain authority over Ukraine, turn Ukraine into a Belarus, a state that can take no action without Russian approval. And to do that, of course, he is not going to accept any kind of peace agreement or ceasefire. Because, as we've mentioned, the Ukrainians are not going to sign any deal that doesn't provide a security guarantee against Russian reinvasion. Because, again, the threat of invasion, the threat of coercion is enough to dominate that neighboring country like Ukraine. And we've seen increasingly that Vladimir Putin has changed has been a moving target, right? He says at first, I need XYZ for a ceasefire deal. But then he goes, well, actually, I can't make a deal with Zelensky because he's illegitimate. So you have to have elections first. Then he goes, well, the precondition for a ceasefire is actually Russia occupying these regions. Actually, we need a full ceasefire and a withdrawal of Ukrainian troops. Oh, I can do a ceasefire, but you have to stop sharing intelligence and military assistance with Ukraine. And every time, right, Russia moves its targets, it has no real meaningful negotiating positions. And that's because they're not meaningfully negotiating. They're just waking up, telling the Americans something different, watching and laughing as the administration and its officials run around like idiots trying to accommodate Vladimir Putin's needs. And it's sort of funny, right, if it wasn't, lives at stake. But what it really is about psychologically. Putin is a very smart guy. He's a former KGB agent. And what it does is establish a psychological precedence. It's sort of like getting a tyrannical boss. If the boss comes in on day one and starts ordering you to do jumping jacks or to make a funny face or to pick up his dry cleaning, you're going to say no. But a good boss, what they're going to do is gradually train you good boss. I mean a manipulative sociopathic boss. They are going to train you slowly over time to do their bidding without thinking. And so by getting the administration and its staff to jump when Putin says jump, to take all of Putin's statements incredibly seriously, to follow Putin's instructions about what he wants and what he needs to do this ceasefire, what he's doing is manipulating these the White House, really the White House, to follow him, right? And the idea is that after a couple months of this kind of weird behavior, Putin will be able to do things like demand that Trump pick up his dry cleaning. The example that, for example, Ben Hodges gave would be Putin to demand that Trump attend a May Day parade in Red Square, something that Trump wouldn't think twice about. And then Putin will parade captured and destroyed U.S. equipment past the U.S. president, effectively humiliating him, sort of like I'm trying to think like the way the Romans would force Gaelic kings to watch as their people were paraded past them in chains. So this kind of training someone up to not see humiliation as humiliation is something that I suspect Putin is kind of doing. again, he's trying to normalize the discussion in the administration again, so that preposterous, unthinkable demands are seen as normal. Now, as we've seen, Trump is just simply unable. He's utterly powerless to actually threaten or coerce or even engage in strong negotiations with Vladimir Putin. He only seems to be willing to do so with the Ukrainians, right? He said recently, for example, that Kiev, if they don't sign the negotiating deal, they're going to have a bad day. Now, the White House, Trump has, in contrast, never said Putin's going to have a bad day. He's never threatened or coerced Putin in any way. He won't even say things like, he literally yesterday, he was like, oh, I'm not saying any of this is Russia's fault, but if it was Russia's fault, I would have to take some serious actions. Does that sound like a strong negotiator? Does that sound like someone who's meeting strength with strength? Or does it sound, again, like someone who has been beaten down by a tyrannical boss? I'm not saying it's not right for you to make me pick up your dry cleaning. I'm just saying if a boss asked their employee to do personal things, another employee, who isn't me, by the way, might have some concern about that from an ethical perspective, right? That's what I hear when I hear that the president's current rhetoric around Vladimir Putin. It's pretty childish. And here's a classic example, right? Trump, the U.S. Treasury says, listen, we're issuing new sanctions related to Russia. Sounds pretty good, right? Sounds like a strong action, but related to Russia is doing some work, because when we look it up, they're not actually sanctions about Russia. They're sanctions against a Houthi procurement network, securing commodities from Russia. In fact, these sanctions themselves are not even against Russia broadly. They are literally two human beings, two people, and they're not even Russian. They're Russian-based Afghan businessmen, right? Two Russian-based Afghan businessmen who have assisted a Houthi network with purchasing commercial initiatives, right? So some of them are arms procurement, likely things like FPV drones, and some of them are civilian gear that is converted to military uses. What I find pretty hilarious is literally there's a Russian-flagged vessel called the Theseus, right, which is, of course, classically the ship of Theseus, is a term for a ship that has had every plank on it replaced, but still calls itself the Theseus. It's literally a name that says, I am engaging in sanctions fraud, which is just the fact that the Russians are willing to be so brazen as to name a sanctions evading ship after a Greek ship famous for basically having its identity duplicated. Really just some brilliant stuff, right? But don't worry, guys. They also went after 3 Russian-based LLCs that you've never heard of, which, for those of you keeping score at home, you may know that creating an LLC is the easiest thing on earth. Literally, I have like 4 LLCs. Half of them don't even do anything. I just had them because I thought I was going to launch a different business with them, and it never happened. But it costs you literally no money. You can do it online in like a few minutes. And so the fact is that these are not, calling these tough sanctions is almost comical. It's almost insulting. This has done literally nothing. This impacts Russia in no measurable way. Remember, the Houthis, while Russia and Iran have a strong relationship, remember all those Shahed drones that Russia throws at Ukraine are Iranian designed and in a lot of cases Iranian manufactured. This is a far cry from those meaningful sanctions, right? Likely Russia or the Houthis have dozens of other Russian-based businessmen that are willing to spend, probably within 48 hours, we'll have new LLCs up and running with bank accounts, if that's even necessary. And we're going to talk a little bit about not just Elon's conspiracy theory, but actually why Trump himself seems to be greenlighting sanctions evasion. But there's a couple of other stat. One other stat I thought was interesting is that according to at least one poll, half of Russians back a temporary ceasefire in Ukraine. Now, this is worth noting because, again, this is a Russian poll center, and we know that the Russian public is never going to answer a poll honestly because, well, it would put them and their family at tremendous risk. I'm not going to sit there and be like, Russians are lying because they're maniacs. Russians are not stupid. Russian culture at this point has survived 100 years of Soviet rule, and now Vladimir Putin's autocracy. They know that to survive in these environments, you can't come out and say things that in Russia are illegal. For example, saying that I think Russia shouldn't have invaded Ukraine is illegal. You will get thrown in jail, and people have gotten thrown in jail for exactly those things. So when a pollster asks, do you support a ceasefire? It's funny because you can see the Russians aren't really sure what they're supposed to say, right? But what's note is that 26% of respondents strongly support a truce, 24% somewhat support it, 41% oppose the idea, and 25% of those strongly reject it. So I think that is really interesting because Vladimir Putin has actually said explicitly, he's like, I support a ceasefire, but... And then he adds a condition that is completely preposterous. I support a ceasefire, but you can't give Ukraine military arms or intelligence. You can't strengthen their position in any way. Or he said, I support a ceasefire, but the Ukrainians have to withdraw from the 4 contested regions, and Volodymyr Zelensky has to leave the presidency. So, it's a ceasefire, but not really. It's a ceasefire preconditioned on total Russian victory. So I take this with a grain of salt, take the Russian public with a grain of salt. Now, I want to point out, guys, that today, I know I'm a little behind, but today we are dropping the videos on Combat Vet News. There's been some absolutely crazy GoPro footage coming out of Kursk. We did a deep dive breakdown on that, and this is where you can get access to those uncensored videos, the kind that YouTube has forbidden me from showing you. Now, if you're interested in doing that, right, this functions just like Patreon. If you are committed to supporting me, you notice that I am critical. I was critical of the previous White House. I'm critical of this White House. And the reason I can get away with it is because I have you guys supporting me. You guys have my back. And so but that is the function of you guys over on Combat Vet News. So check the link in the description, get access to not just the twice a week uncensored combat videos, the Q&As, but you get the whole archive, hundreds of videos going back to the start of the war. You can literally watch the war evolve in real time through these videos. It's pretty awesome. So the link, again, down there in the description. Now, you guys that are OGs of the channel know that after I left the military, I actually joined the Department of Homeland Security in their internal affairs wing called the Inspector General, where I handled fraud, waste, and abuse claims. So when I see a story, particularly around Elon Musk, who is basically cosplaying as a real auditor, I have to say something, particularly when he rolls out a unhinged conspiracy theory, right? Because you cannot make decisions based on this. And we know that Elon Musk has been wrong about a lot of things. He claimed to have found 200-year-olds drawing Social Security when, in fact, it was simply a database error that he and his 19-year-old lackeys didn't understand. But that didn't stop him from claiming that he totally, this time for realsies, uncovered fraud. So he's done it again. He says this time for real. He's like, I definitely 100% found fraud in Social Security. The last 3 times I was wrong, but this time I got it, right? He shared what he called a mind-blowing chart showing millions of non-citizens given Social Security numbers under Biden, right? He said, we went there to find fraud and we found this by accident. Now, I want to point this out that right there, if you're an auditor nerd, you don't go in to find fraud, right? Because what auditors have to be committed to is go where the facts lead them. It's like, imagine a policeman knocking on your door and saying, I'm here to find murderers, right? I'm here to find drug use. I'm here to find terrorists. Well, it sounds like that cop has already decided who you are, right? Whereas a good detective is going to sit there and go, hey, I'm just trying to gather facts, and I'll let the evidence tell me what I need to know. So a good auditor is never going to say, we're going to find fraud. What we're going to say is we're going to answer a question, right? We're going to answer a question. That is usually what it is. There's always an audit. A good audit is going to start with a good question, right? How many non-citizens get Social Security numbers, and were any issued that shouldn't have been issued? That would be a good audit question. But Elon says, I'm going to find fraud. Well, Okay, buddy. So what does this chart actually say? Let's see if we can find the chart here. Oh, of course, they don't actually link it. But the chart overall, let's see if we can find Elon's chart here. But he essentially alleges that there were thousands of Social Security numbers issued to non-citizens on behalf by the Biden administration, right? And again, let's see if we can find the actual footage here. Right? New York Post reposting literally down to the word a Fox News article. Shout out to the New York Post. Here we go, baby. Here we go. All right. So he's got one of his shills, a guy named Anthony Garcia or whatever, who, again, they want to see this so badly. They're so sure it's true. So what this chart is, let's see if we can get some higher quality here. This says it's 1080p. Okay, so this guy is basically, here he is, new non-citizen Social Security numbers issued. And you can see that there were small amounts in 2021, growing amount in 22, growing in 23, and spectacularly high in 24. And then actually 2025, which we're only halfway through, we're actually on par for the same level of issuance this year. Now, there's a key piece of information here that none of these people know or understand. I think they can perfectly well know it, is that from 2020 until 2024, the administration had an emergency order that said the border is closed because of COVID-19. The border is officially closed. And the Biden administration actually fought to keep that emergency public health order in effect, right? To say no asylum claims can be processed. Even though U.S. law says that we have to process asylum claims, we say there's a public health emergency. We have to temporarily restrict asylum claims. And then what happens is that in 2024, the Supreme Court said officially, Biden, we are making you open the border. We are forcing you to do it. And so a bunch of individuals came across the border, right? You can see here, entered kind of the asylum process. They almost always make asylum claims. But then you go, well, how'd they get Social Security numbers, right? Well, if Elon had just punched into Grok, his own AI, he would learn exactly what the rest of us have learned, that Social Security numbers are not citizenship. You do not give your social, right, in order to vote, right? Your social and your birthday are used to verify that you are the person you say you are, but your citizenship is a different thing entirely. Social Security number is not a citizenship number, right? It is a taxpayer number. It says this is the number that we use to track how much you've paid into Social Security and, if authorized, how much you can withdraw, right? Obviously, because Social Security numbers, right, were issued in the 1950s, but the U.S. citizen as a category has existed since 1776. So you see here, literally his own AI points out that non-citizens can draw Social Security numbers because they have a work permit, right? Such as an H-1B, an L-1, a green card, right? An employment authorization document are also issued with Social Security numbers. And remember, these can be very temporary work permits. So the reason is because the U.S. government says, listen, if you're going to come here to work, you have to pay taxes. You have to pay taxes. So we're giving you a Social Security number. It doesn't mean that you have a right to draw Social Security, right? It just means you have to pay into the system, right? So again, these numbers are used to track earnings and ensure proper reporting for taxes and Social Security contributions and potentially future benefits. Because while most individuals who are, for example, in the process of adjudicating an asylum claim, most of them don't have a right to claim Social Security. Some non-citizens actually do. Refugees, asylees, or other types of visa holders may qualify for Social Security benefits if they've worked long enough and paid into the system, right? That Social Security number is required to track their contributions and administer benefits. For example, a lawful permanent resident who works for years and then retires might claim Social Security retirement benefits, a green card holder. It's also possible, for example, let's say that you arrive in the U.S. on an H-1B, you pay into the system, right? Then you get married, you get your green card, and then years later, you get your citizenship. Well, the Social Security Administration is going to say, well, actually, you paid Social Security for all these years, and now you're a U.S. citizen, right? Makes perfect sense. right? Non-citizen dependent family members, spouse or dependent children may get socials if they're eligible to work or need to do tax filings. Again, if you are a citizen, right, or you are a green card holder and you're going to claim your child as a tax credit, you're going to need that child to have a social security number. So you can see that that it's clear. A non-citizen getting a social security number just means that they pay taxes. You don't vote with your taxpayer number. I know when you're a billionaire, Elon Musk doesn't seem to understand the difference. He's like, money is the same thing as citizenship, guys. It's not, right? There's no amount of money that can make Elon Musk's vote count more than mine or more than yours if you're a U.S. citizen. And what I want to point out is one of the things he says in this conspiracy rant. He says, well, the thousands of these people, no, actually, he doesn't give a number. It's very interesting. He gives the exact number of non-citizen SSNs issued, but he just says, well, some of these people voted. But here's what I want to point out. If you got a social security number issued, let's say because you were a green card holder, right? You married a U.S. spouse, 2021. You marry your spouse, you go, man, I'm finally, me and my spouse, I love her. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life living together. If you are a green card holder and then you live for 3 years in the United States, that would mean, if you did that in 2021, that would mean you could have become a U.S. citizen and you would have the same social that you got when you were a non-citizen, meaning that you could have voted in the 2024 election if you had a green card in 2021. But this is how citizenship works. When people say I support legal immigration, my brother in Christ, this is the legal immigration, right? They have to demonstrate, of course, good moral character, no convictions, English language proficiency, a knowledge of U.S. civics, complete, of course, a naturalization form, and, of course, USCIS has to process your application, right? And then you get to take your oath. And so this, I think, is really, really important to understand that Elon Musk is allegedly, one, it's not clear that he's one of the smartest people on earth, right? Especially given the fact that he's admitted to drug use, right? Chronic ketamine use can actually reduce your IQ, just like any other kind of chronic drug use. But also, either he doesn't know this, he didn't even Google things to understand, and he just, again, stood in front of an audience and touted a false conspiracy theory that is easily verifiably incorrect. Or he does know better and he simply wants to use this as a pretext to do something worse, right? And one of the things that the Supreme Court has held up is that your U.S. citizenship is a thing that you are. It is not a thing you have, right? If you arrive at the U.S.-Mexico border and you go up to the Border Patrol agent, or it's actually an OFO officer. You'll get some brownie points, by the way, if you address the people in the blue suits as officer and the people in the green suits as agent. They're very particular about it. But you go up to the customs officer and you say, I'd like to enter the United States. And they say, great, passport, please. And you say, I don't have a passport. You as a U.S. citizen can still enter the United States. You just need to tell them, I'm a U.S. citizen. I can give you other information that you can verify my citizenship with. For example, here's my full name. Here's my date of birth. You could even potentially give them your social security number, because that could be used to track down your identity, right? But your date of birth, your full name, your place of birth, all that info could be used. I have seen personally individuals, American citizens, cross into the United States with a copy of their birth certificate in a plastic bag. That is an entry document, because your citizenship is not documentary contingent. But if someone like Elon creates a fiction that there is widespread abuse of the voting system through these kind of social security things, they are going to try to sit there and say, actually, U.S. citizenship or your right to vote only applies if you have the right documents. And you might sit there and say, well, okay, sure, a photo ID to confirm you are who you say you are. But then they go, well, wait. You can get a photo ID just about anywhere. Maybe to confirm your citizenship, you need a passport. right? And you can't get issued a passport if you've committed certain crimes, or you don't have certain type, or you don't have several $100s to apply to get it, right? Or they say, well, passport, you can get a passport with a green card. So maybe to prove citizenship, you need to show up with your birth certificate and a passport and a driver's license, right? And then you see how this can be used to construct systematic disenfranchisement, right? Imagine if you apply to your driver's license for the first time, how hard is it to go to the DMV, get all your documents together, get approved? If they made voting as hard as getting a new driver's license issued, it would effectively reduce the total number of people voting by, I would suspect, probably about 70 to 80%. And that's really part of the goal here, is to turn voting into something that is not something that broad enfranchisement, but for a minority of U.S. citizens who have the time and the money to jump through requisite hoops. That's pretty clearly what this is. Again, I have some conspiracies about Elon Musk's worldview, but I'm not going to share them here. But do you want to talk about sanctions evasion? Yeah, I need to talk about sanctions evasion, because the Trump administration has done something weird. Trump issued a pardon. Nothing interesting here. He's pardoned a lot of people, particularly crypto bros. But he also did a weird thing. He pardoned a crypto company. Now, it's not clear that a company, we all know that companies are people, and if you can pardon them, it's only a matter of time before LLCs can vote. Remember, sign up for all those LLCs. And so, but what is so weird about this? Well, what Trump appeared to have done is issued a full and unconditional pardon to 4 individuals and their crypto exchange, one I've never heard of, called BitMEX. BitMEX, right? Famous for trading in derivatives tied to the value of cryptocurrencies, right? So it allows you essentially to place bets on the direction crypto is going to go. And of course, as you can imagine, BitMEX actually was charged, and its employees, or its executives, were charged in Manhattan court for what they say violating the Bank Secrecy Act, not having a weak anti-money laundering program, but no anti-money laundering program, right? You could get a BitMEX account with only an email address. Now imagine you're a Russian-based Afghan or whatever. Imagine you're a Russian-based Russian, and you say, I have to find a way to get my rubles out of this country. I need to exchange them into some kind of vehicle to get them outside the country so that I can purchase sensitive electronic equipment or whatever for the Russian government. How can they do that without going through sanctioned banks? Because all Russian banks are sanctioned. Well, BitMEX would have provided a perfect vehicle to do so. Now, obviously, this happened in 2020. BitMEX, right, was shut down prior to the start of the war in Ukraine, but Russia was still subject to considerable sanctions. And many other entities like Iran or China or other human rights abusers were subject to these sanctions. So the fact that you could enter an alternate financial system through BitMEX is pretty incredible. Now, what's worth noting is that it took 5 years and a criminal fine around $100 million on top of $130 million in civil penalties for BitMEX to finally get sort of put in its place. In fact, the U.S. attorney said BitMEX opened itself up as a vehicle for large-scale money laundering and sanctions evasion schemes, posing a serious threat to the integrity of the financial system, right? It was able to obtain revenue through the U.S. market without regard to U.S. criminal laws. And what's fascinating is, again, if you look at BitMEX, their total transaction volume is billions of dollars in daily trading. Because remember, let's say, for example, that you are running a ransomware scheme. You're hacking and demanding ransom in crypto. But then you're a sanctioned Russian entity. You can take that crypto, put it into BitMEX with just an email address, and then you can pretend to trade it, do a bunch of basically even trades, buy a coin, sell a coin, and then you can go into the United States or have a lackey in the United States, pull that money out and say, these are the proceeds of crypto trading. They're not a criminal enterprise. They're not human trafficking money, it's not scamming old ladies. It's just me trading crypto derivatives. And that happens to the tune of billions of dollars a day in trading volume. Again, have you ever heard of BitMEX? Isn't it weird that a company you've literally never heard of, a company that has dozens of US-based regulated competitors, is doing billions of dollars in daily trading volume? So weird, right? Of course, right? BitMEX is now pardoned, which means that you cannot be recharged. So they cannot violate the Bank Secrecy Act a second time. It is a full and unconditional pardon. So what Trump has done, what the administration rather has done, is significant, right? Because it created an environment, it created a vehicle designated by the administration, by the US government, that says everyone else has to be subject to anti-money laundering regulation except for BitMEX. Whoa, crazy. What's BitMEX going to do now? What could that mean? Well, of course, it also coincides with Trump launching his own cryptocurrency. In fact, Trump is literally launching an alternative to the US dollar. This is happening. This story dropped, by the way, 3 days ago. So do you think it's weird that the president is going to get control of what's called a stablecoin, but it is a crypto backed by money, backed by dollars, or notably in the law, dollar-like assets, which is weird. Can you think of a dollar-like asset? Right? You might think, U.S. treasuries or something else highly liquid. But, the U.S. legislation also allows you to have crypto coins that are kind of like dollars. So you could have treasury coin. You could have other crypto coins backing your crypto coin. Do you see how Trump has basically built himself an alternate money printer? And then he's going to, he has the ability to allow sanctioned entities to evade sanctions, or foreign governments to obscure the source of these funds and potentially use them to purchase his cryptocurrency. It is literally just transferring of money. He has cleared a path to transfer money in a direct slush fund way from any entity on earth, war criminals, sanctions, scammers, whoever you want, Vladimir Putin himself, and transfer it directly without any paper trail into his pocket. Buckle up, nerds. Don't worry, guys. Are we great yet? Is America great? You feeling great? Feeling great? Well, you can run a crypto scam, right? Right? The average person can do this. Just pardon a money laundering entity and then launch a shitty crypto coin. Yeah, we can all do it. It's rich people can do whatever they want. Poor people get told to do whatever rich people want. Thanks to Bill Collier, Robert Colbert, guys, Martin, Gina Quest, Chris Quartz, Francis Carr, Sam 90, Petra, Taruru, and Jalen Gao. Thanks to our lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do it without you guys. Appreciate you so much. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.